Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. Milford, Connecticut, December 6, 2022, 9 o'clock p.m. 40-year-old Julie Minogue was a single mother raising two sons with a third who had already moved out of the house. Two of the boys she had had before she met her then-current boyfriend, Ewen Dewitt. Her third son she had had with Ewen. But very quickly, Julie realized that Ewen Dewitt wasn't the man he initially portrayed himself to be. The abuse began very early in their relationship. In 2019, Dewitt threw a playpen at her while he was drunk. Minogue was holding their baby at the time and suffered a wound to her head that required 5 staples. She got a protective order against him after that. But apparently that didn't stop Ewen, because by November 2022, Julie contacted police again saying he had violated the restraining order by sending her 200 text messages over the course of only a couple of days. Julie wrote in the complaint that she was scared for her safety and that of her children, that Ewen had gotten himself into a lot of trouble with drugs and alcohol, and she was scared he was going to kill her. The criminal complaint said that Dewitt told her his new life mission would be to ruin hers. On November 1st of 2022, Minogue was granted the new no-contact order. A few days after that, Ewen Dewitt got an axe, then waited till nightfall to call an Uber to take him to Julie's condo. Julie had been home with 2 of her sons. Her 17-year-old was upstairs, while Julie was downstairs with the 3-year-old. Julie's eldest son was in the Coast Guard. The teen had been taking a nap, but he was awakened hours later when he heard a man screaming. The teenager came downstairs and he could hear a man yelling, "You didn't believe me." The boy said he heard his mother scream once. When he finally got downstairs, he immediately recognized the intruder as Ewen Dewitt. Minogue was lying on the floor with blood everywhere. The boy screamed at Dewitt to get out. He then ran upstairs, locked his bedroom door, and called the police, who arrived minutes later by 9:07 p.m. The boy jumped out of the second-floor window and ran across the street to the officers on the scene. Police found the front door open and the home in disarray. Julie was on the ground in a pool of blood. Her 3-year-old child was on the couch, appearing to be in a state of shock. Police found the axe that was used on top of the stove, with Julie's blood and hair still covering it. Ewen Dewitt, on the other hand, was nowhere to be found. Then, shortly after 10 o'clock p.m., police received a phone call from Dewitt's own mother. She said that Ewen had just called her and said he had killed his girlfriend. Ewen's mother said he was still in Milford and that he was walking around and wanted to die by suicide. Police got Ewen's phone number from his mother, but when they called him, he said he didn't want to talk, then hung up. Officers pinged his cell phone to an area in West Haven and began searching for him. Patrons at a local bar said they'd seen a man matching Dewitt's description who had just left. He had then been seen entering a trailer park. Officers located the trailer and found Dewitt inside. Of course, he's not black, so he was taken into custody alive. Ewen Dewitt was charged with murder, felony home invasion, criminal violation of a standing criminal protective order, criminal violation of a restraining order, and first-degree reckless endangerment and risk of injury to or impairing morals of children. That was in December of 2022. It took years to get around to finally having a trial date set for this guy. Now, if there was ever an open and shut case of first-degree murder, it's this. Connecticut doesn't have the death penalty, but prosecutors could have easily gone for life in prison. Instead, they began to offer this creep a plea deal practically from the very beginning. In March of this year, Dewitt took a plea deal and was sentenced last week to 40 years. And how did he take the news? Not well.
Cold, calculated, well thought out, to the extent that we took a Uber.
Sit down, sit down, Brian. Hell, you piece of
Watch your mouth.
State's Attorney Margaret Kelly was in the middle of telling the judge that the murder of Julie Minogue wasn't impulsive and that Ewen had committed a cold and calculated act. And that's when Dewitt decided to prove her right. The family of Julie Minogue has since announced that they're going to be seeking legal action against a number of entities and individuals who they feel were responsible for Julie's death.
Well, her family is now suing the police department, the officer that was assigned to investigate her case specifically as well, and the city of Milford. The family attorney saying that the victim, Julie Minogue, reached out to police several times in the weeks before her murder about harassment from Ewen Dewitt, the father of her child. Now, police say they knew he sent 200 text messages to her in the days leading up to the alleged killing.
Why was it that his pending charges were never followed up on? Well, we already know. Racial immunity from law, that's why. The system didn't fail. It worked exactly the way that it's supposed to. Because for people from the dominant society, law enforcement always takes a real hands-off policy when it comes to any actions that may infringe upon or curtail their movements. They only do that with black people. That way they can give artificial privileges and perks to having the right skin color. You see, after Minogue filed the complaint that the restraining order had been violated, the police did call Dewitt and he admitted to calling Minogue foul names, but he then refused to come to the police department when they told him to. The police did file a warrant for Dewitt's arrest, but prosecutors sent the warrant back asking for more information. The police, however, didn't bother to resubmit the warrant application until December 13th, a week after Julie Minogue had already been killed. By the way, has anyone ever told you how dangerous a job the police have? The officer who had been handling Minogue's case resigned from the Milford Police Department before an internal affairs investigation could be completed, but I think we all know this creep's gonna wind up immediately getting hired by some other law enforcement agency, because that's how it always goes. When you're part of the dominant society, you fail upwards, and your past is never an impediment to career advancement, no matter how many times you screw up or how many people get hurt. But there's also culpability by the state's attorney's office as well. The prosecutors sent back the original warrant for Dewitt's arrest asking for additional information. But as Mike Lawler, a former prosecutor and state legislator, said, while it is customary for prosecutors to ask for more details, it doesn't have to be done at that stage. Quote, after an arrest is made, prosecutors can get more information as they get ready to potentially try a case. That's what we see with black people all the time. Black folks get locked up, thrown in a cage, and don't even have a trial for years on end. That's the reason that I gave you the crime report about Sinatra Jordan, a black man who was held 940 days without trial, because you have those little rednecks down there in Mississippi saying that, well, you may have a right to a speedy trial, but you don't have a right to a speedy arraignment or anything like that. And this is a former legislator saying this. So they didn't have to wait for more information. They could have had that guy arrested and gotten the details later. But of course, one of the main racial privileges is freedom of movement. And that's the actual principle that the police and the prosecutors were trying to protect. It certainly wasn't public safety. This tragedy didn't have to happen. But when the police have more in common with the killer than not, this becomes inevitable. We can all be disgusted with this crime, but Ewen Dewitt was the one who was holding the axe. It was the prosecutors and the police who allowed it to be in his hands in the first place, when they could have and should have taken him off the streets. And that being the case, they also have Julie Minogue's blood on their hands. But the same way that Ewen Dewitt was not taken off the streets before he could kill, none of the corrupt cops or the lazy prosecutors who sat on their hands and let this tragedy occur are going to be held to account. And yet we'll still have the white media and politicians and the police claiming that they're doing everything they can. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Wali Bilal, Nicole Johnson, Glenda Tice, Latrice Ross, and Wahib Abdul. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.